Hi, welcome to episode 3 of the Namespace podcast. I'm Derek and I'm here with
Jordan.
And we want to discuss Python and whether or not it's a fad today.
Yes. So first, before we get into whether or not Python's a fad, we're just going to talk about some history of Python and where it all began.
No. But before that, we need to talk about why we had this conversation.
Do we?
I think so. I
okay.
mean, we don't...
You can say
We just need a little context. Okay, so a while back, while Jordan and I were working together, Jordan was told that she should learn Go and that Python is just a fad. And we were both working in Python at the time. And she just so happened to tell me that over Slack. And in the course of about 2.5 minutes, I was just like, statistics.
Yeah.
No, this is not a fad. But it was an odd enough comment from somebody, and somebody with an engineering background that's been in the industry a long time. I was like, well, okay, hold on now.
Yeah, I mean, I understand if as a developer, it's good to keep learning things and learning new languages. But why would I learn a language because Python's a fad? Because that just didn't seem accurate.
Yeah, and by no means am I trying to say Go is not a good language to learn or it's a fad. I was just taken aback by Python's a fad.
Right. So we figured we'd have an episode on it and just talk about kind of some stats about Python and just about what makes Python different because I mean, a lot of developers out there haven't used Python. And one of the stats we're going to talk about is it's one of the languages that developers really want to get into. So we're just going to kind of introduce it.
So covering the history of Python, most people know that Python was named after Monty Python and the Flying Circus. That's why it's named Python. Fewer people know that Van Rossum was just looking for a hobby style project during the Christmas break while his company was shut down, or not shut down, but closed for the holidays. And so he wanted to write this interpreter for a new scripting language that was based off of ABC. And so in 1989, he started on what would become Python. I think it was 1991 was the first release, the first official release of Python.
Yeah. And then the thing I wanted to know is what Van Rossum, is it Rossum?
Rossum. Rossum. I can't say that I'm saying it right, but I'm always saying it as Van Rossum.
Right. So one of the things I wanted to figure out is what his goal was with creating the language. And so we found online, he actually submitted a funding proposal to DARPA where he specified some goals for Python. So I'll just read those off. An easy and intuitive language, but as powerful as major competitors. Also open source, code that is understandable as plain English, suitable for everyday tasks and short development times, which these stated goals, I think, really do define Python as a language. Like when you come to think of it, I think these are some of the most notable characteristics of the language. So I think he really met his goals there.
I think it's also interesting, back in, what did you say, 1991, he put that proposal in?
99, I guess. It was a funding proposal in 99.
Okay, so the funding proposal in 99, back then, well, okay, I can't honestly say because I wasn't coding back then, but historically, you actually paid for compilers for languages, and so there was a cost to choosing that language. And being an open source one, this is why he's submitting funding, and so you had to state goals, whereas a lot of these other ones, I don't know if they had goals. So as we talk here just now, that thought pops into my head, and perhaps we could have researched more, but I think that might be part of the success of Python is it was a unique way this was done. So it had to have a roadmap, a mission, a goal, and other languages may not have had that other than the, oh, well, I hate this syntax, or, oh, I have to do this a bunch and it's really irritating. And so they tried to fix it that way, where Python was a little bit different. And so I think that might have been why it was so successful. And I think that might be why it's, inspiring development of new languages. I remember hearing that Golang was partially inspired by Python and its simplicity and some of the syntax. And so, just humble thought there. That might be why Python was so successful.
Yeah, it wasn't just a company saying, let's make a language for us to use, but let's make it pretty much the same as other languages, except fix some main things that we want to do differently. Or it was meant to be new and different. And just it was meant to solve specific goals and problems.
Yeah. So it's been fun writing Python. I was actually very adverse to Python. No, not the first time. The first time I ever had to write Python was in a college class, and it was algorithms 2, basically, whatever your equivalent of that is. And the first thing we had to write was a heap, and the heap was just a monster. It was not super fun to write. And then it was like one class. Out of the nowhere, they had us write Python, and then I went back into Java, C Sharp land. And then I met a data scientist who was all about Python, and he loved Python, but through all of his rantings and ravings, like, but you're not doing anything with the Python. And so I was like super adverse to Python because of that interaction. And now I write Python pretty much every day, and I love it, and it's great.
Yeah, I didn't truly get to appreciate Python at first because it was my first programming language, so I didn't have anything to compare it to. But then when jumping into the other languages, it made me really appreciate how succinct Python is. So yeah, I guess now we can just talk about some of the main differences.
Yeah, what sets Python apart in your opinion from the other languages?
Right. So succinct for sure is a really big one. Like I was talking to Derek, it's like the Python code basically looks like pseudocode. Like if you go into a coding interview and you tell the interviewer, hey, is it cool if I just write in pseudocode? And they're like, yeah, you start writing code on the board. You might end up just writing Python because it looks so similar. I mean, it's very easy to read. And
hence the stated goal reads as easy as plain English.
Exactly. So that part's great. And then the other thing that was really big, which I didn't know about when I started programming, but the fact that there's no interfaces and also that there's no distinction between private, public, protected functions really sets it apart. And I mean, in a way, it simplifies it because you reduce the code, the language down to a subset of, I guess, I'll say features that are in other languages. So there's not as many things to think about in deciding what interface you want to use or deciding if something should be private or protected. But then I think some people don't like that part of Python because it allows you to...
Guilty.
Yeah. So here, you could talk about some of your...
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I would probably say start with a statically typed language,
yeah.
C#, Java, well, never Java, C++ maybe. And yeah, it's definitely something unique. Once you learn how to use it properly, it's wonderful. Definitely sets it apart. The fact that data encapsulation is kind of just thrown away, which is one of the selling points of object-oriented programming.
Yeah.
And so kind of, wrestle with that. I wrestled with it when I first started learning Python. I knew OO programming, and I was then trying to do OO stuff in Python, and people were like, oh, it's not Pythonic. And I was like, what the heck is that? Mm-hmm. So that brings me to my first point that I like about Python, where it is the one language where as a user of it, you kind of have an identity. So people refer to themselves as Pythonistas or Pythoneers. And there's debate about what each one means, but these are users of Python. And you don't have that with, you have it in Go. People call them gophers. But, Java, C#, some of these other languages, you don't have that kind of identity, and you don't have things like the Pythonic way in other languages. You have this dude's opinion.
Yeah.
And so I think that sets it apart. As we were talking just before, like, I think it set apart because it had some clear goals set out ahead of time, and it kind of had to, what's the phrase? Desperation is the mother of all invention, or something like that.
I don't know. Sure.
There's a phrase like that. I'm not saying Van Rossum was desperate, but he had to rethink how he did things. And I think that sets Python apart. It's got a great community to it, and the whole PEP process. PEP stands for Python Enhancement Proposal. Do we want to talk about that now, or are we going to talk about PEPs later?
I guess we'll get more into it later, but that is something that sets Python apart, is the whole proposal process, and the idea that it's there's not one company backing it. Like,
so Python is fully democratized, which the only other major language that I could think of that's like that is PHP, and PHP is a bit of a mess, but C# is backed by Microsoft, Java by Oracle, Exma scripts, ECMA scripts is backed by ECMA, which is a spec, and the most popular implementation is JavaScript. And so that Go is backed by Google. And so those companies are defining where the language is going, whereas Python, where the language is going is defined by the users. And I think that's phenomenal, and why it's built up so much community around it. And I really love it. I've never written a PEP myself. Life goal is someday to write a PEP.
That would be really cool.
Actually end up on the... okay. So this is another one. I guess we should have covered it in history. So Van Rossum was known as the benevolent dictator for life.
Oh, yeah.
And in 2018, he actually stepped down from that, and the control of Python actually has gone to the Python steering committee, and there are elections of who is going to go onto the steering committee. And it's just amazing how this, 30-year-old language basically has come around to, like, my business degree is trying to come out right now. You have the phase of a team, which is like the storming, the norming, and the business buzzwords that I no longer care about. But like, you literally had it. Everybody stormed to Python, and then it normalized, and you had these groups come out, like the Python core developers, and now the steering committee, and how elections are done. And I think it's really cool how well thought out it has been every single step of the way. Yeah, that really sets Python apart big time. I think that's that whole process is probably why there's the identity thing going on with Pythonistas and all that. It's like you're really what's the word? You can be really... And you're really involved as a developer with Python. You can become really involved with the language. Like, if you have a proposal, you can go ahead and... If you want to become a Python core developer, you can become a Python core developer. Yeah, you can be very involved. You could eventually get to the steering committee. Yeah, you can be elected. So it's pretty cool how the community plays in. And I guess a couple other notes for why Python's different for me.
Well, a really obvious one just from writing Python is there's no curly braces, which most all other languages, I guess not all, probably most, you use curly braces for your functions and your if-else statements and whatnot. Since Python doesn't have curly braces, it enforces you to use indentation for scoping your functions and conditionals and all of that.
It solves a mild problem seen in style guides.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I'm coming back to PEPs.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. You have PEP 8, which is the official style guide for Python from Python by Python. Like,
right.
It's
and
wonderful.
There's only one. It's not like...
But it takes out some of those issues of, is the curly brace on the line of the function declaration or after? What about classes? Is it the same as the functions or should it be different? And it's just like, no, we do it this way. And it makes that a requirement, not a choice. And in some cases, I think that's better.
Yeah, it's cleaner. It reduces the thing where multiple people on team have just a different style or whatever. It enforces the code to look clean, like it was all written by one person. I
know that bugs Jordan. We also used to write a fair amount of PHP and React code together, and I don't care about that stuff as much, and so Jordan would always kindly ask me to fix it.
Yeah, I'm all about conventions. We were just talking before, like naming conventions too and all that stuff. It's very
so important.
So important. And then another thing that makes Python different for me is just building applications very quickly. Like even the frameworks are succinct. So if you're using Flask, you just really need a few lines of code to make a Flask app.
I think the minimum Flask app is like 5 lines.
Like the hello world for Flask.
Yeah. To take out the empty lines, it's I think 5 lines.
Yeah, so you can get stuff started really quickly, and for learning a new framework or learning a new language, it's really easy to pick up Python because of this. Like you can start very, very simple and work your way up, rather than with the .NET framework where you immediately have a bunch of code generation in different files and directories, and all of that's really great for structuring your app and what you're going to do with it. But for someone who's just learning .NET, at least for me, whenever I was trying to learn .NET, I want to go through and read all of the code that was generated and see what all these files are. And it takes a little bit longer to understand what's going on. A lot longer.
I wrote C# for 4 years. And then I did code generation for, it was a coding interview. And I did some code generation, but then I was just like, what happened? I made a mistake. Can I fix it? Or do I have to go back and regenerate the code? And I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
Because so much is generated. Instead of 5 lines, it's 5 folders with several files in each folder, and it's a nightmare. Yeah. It's good. I still like C# and .NET, especially .NET Core, but compared to Flask and its 4 to 5 lines,
yeah, very different. Yeah. So there's some things that set Python apart. And now we're going to just bring up some statistics.
Right. Let's defend our point.
Yes.
I think by now you can tell both of us don't think Python is a fad.
Right.
We think it's here to stay. So these are the numbers that defend that point. Mm-hmm. Take them away. You
want me to do it?
Kill them.
Okay.
Get them.
So most of the numbers that we got are from Stack Overflow, because they just have such great analytics and trustworthy insights.
Stack Overflow is always my go-to, especially their annual developer survey. I don't know of a better positioned company to collect this kind of data than Stack Overflow. Every developer has ended up on Stack Overflow at some point, whether you've answered a question or not. You've asked a question or you've found an answer there. Mm-hmm. And being able to pull all of that insight, it's the best sample set for developer insights, I think. And that's why I always go. There's other times. We're going to throw a number out from GitHub as well, but it's about things hosted on GitHub. And, you know, they just have such excellent insight to that. It's the biggest open source hosting out there. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's a great point. Because, I mean, we're not just pulling these stats from some article online that didn't source where they got their number. We're pulling it from websites that would have the information to present these numbers. So we're not just making stuff up here. But
I make up a little bit, but not these.
Not these. So the first stat from Stack Overflow, Python is the most wanted language for the third year in a row. And this means that so most wanted just means number of respondents to the survey who don't use a language but want to learn it. So 27.5% of respondents said that Python is the language that they don't know yet, but they want to learn. And that was number one on the list. So that's 3 years in a row. So people who haven't even touched the language are just hearing about it and wanting to get involved. And that's a big one for showing that it's not a fad. Like, people are thinking about it all the time. They want to learn it.
Right. But not only is it wanted, it's also pretty well loved too.
Yes. So that's the next stat. Second most loved language. And most loved means that of the people who are working with Python right now, they look forward and want to continue working with Python, which says a lot. So 73.5% of respondents that have been using Python want to continue using Python. And that's second most. I forget what was number
Rust
one.
was
Rust.
the top, and they're a pretty fanatical user base. I've not used Rust. It's one that I want to. Knowing now that it's the most loved as well also helps sell me on that, because I think it's going to have similar community support that Python did. But I think it's really interesting that of languages that people use, the ones that use Python are the ones that want to continue using Python second most. And then of people who aren't using a language, Python is still up there as like the top language that they want to be using.
Yeah.
It goes into driving that Python is going to be a faster growing language and is going to be more in demand in the future than some of these other languages.
Yeah.
I don't want to derail us. Sorry, I totally just jumped over you. Please finish your thought.
I was just going to say, I mean, we have these stats from, this is from the 2019, but it's, I mean, 3 years in a row of most loved or most wanted. And if we go back, it's not going to be not on the list. It's probably second or third, which we could have went back some more years, but it's been consistently in the top for a lot of these Stack Overflow articles about just good, like the good things about languages.
So I think one of our statistics there is also about, we didn't do it in comparison to other languages, but I think it was the one from
2017.
I think it was the 2017 one about how Python was growing. It's that, or it's the GitHub one, where it shows that Python just jumped over Java as the most used.
I think that's the GitHub one.
I think that's the GitHub one now that I say it. Or there's more, and you have the notes, so you can tell me exactly.
We didn't put that in the notes. I don't want to click the link, but I think it was the well, actually, so all the links for these stats we'll put in the description for this episode, so you can go check them out for yourself. I do think it's the GitHub one. So
basically, the point was, for the first time, Python jumped Java in popularity, and Java's been just king for the longest time. Yeah. And this goes back to what I was about to say, and I don't want to derail us here. I think Java is actually going to be a dying language. I think in 10 years, Java is going to be sitting kind of where PHP is. And we can unpack that in a different episode, but it was very interesting to see Python take that jump, because Python went up and Java went down this year. And then just knowing that like its trajectory of people who want to use it and people that are using it that want to continue using it, I think it's just going to keep going up and up. Mm-hmm. And you'll see these other older languages start going down and down and down.
Yeah. Yeah. So the one from 2017, I actually think that Python just jumped Java in this one too. But the one we got from 2017 from Stack Overflow is really good. It's showing that Python was the most visited tag in 2017.
Right, so, on Stack Overflow.
On Stack Overflow. So in terms of like all the questions that are being asked, if you're tagging the question as Python, most people who are going to look at questions are looking at the Python tagged questions, is what that means. The majority of people looking at questions. So
yeah, and in that chart that they actually have a couple of charts, but the first one we were looking at shows that the popularity of the Python tag has increased by, well, from 3% to 9, almost 10%.
Yeah.
So what is that? Like a 300% gain or?
Yeah.
That's some math that's never made sense to me, but it's grown, in twice its popularity at this point.
Yeah, if you wanted to go check out the graph, you can check it out at the link, but you can see a lot of languages, there's ups and downs in terms of what people are searching on Stack Overflow, but Python is just shooting up. And this is from the past, I don't know how many years, but I think it was since 2012.
Yep. Since 2012.
Yeah. So it's been in the top 6, but even though it's been shooting up, even in 2012, it was still in the top 6 most searched topics.
Most visited tags.
Most visited tags. So it's not.
So it's got some staying power.
It's been around. Yeah. Okay.
It's been around since 1991.
Yes.
First release. Basically 30 years.
Yeah. And we have one more Stack Overflow statistic. And this one I think is really telling also. This one's really great. So in terms of most popular languages by occupation, Stack Overflow shows different categories like web developer, desktop developer, sysadmin DevOps, data scientist, engineer. All of these, Python is in the top 6 for all of these lists. It's not like Python is just dominating one area of tech. Python is really across the board a really good choice for whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, Python's flooded data science, machine learning, and scientific computing. But yeah, that one points out every step of the way. DevOps, web dev, desktop apps, Python is there, and it's there in a significant way. For
sure. Okay, and then the last stat that we got from GitHub is also really good. So it's been a top 5 language, currently number 2 most popular. I think been a top 5 language. That's probably also since
2014.
2014?
Since 2014.
Okay.
It's been in the top 5, and right now it's sitting at it's the second. It's just beneath JavaScript.
Yeah. So that's in just a number of GitHub repos that include Python, right?
I believe that's how it was.
Yeah. So a lot of people are uploading Python repos, and that's great. Okay, cool. So those are our main stats. And now we'll talk a little bit more about some major points for why we think Python is not a fad. Right,
if you need further convincing.
Yeah, if you need further, because the stats should really do it, but we'll just keep the conversation going. We already talked, like one of the major points is just how Python is dominating in not just in software, but data science, scientific computing. I know like for bioinformatics and things like that, machine learning, AI, you can use Python for all of it, and it's pretty much just taken over. Like what you're saying, everything in R has been ported over to Python now.
Yeah, I cannot fully confirm that. I've never actually written R, but at one point I remember hearing that all of the features that were in R had been ported over to Python. Now that was also 3-4 years ago I heard it, so R may have added more, Python may have added less, but it was basically, if you want anything, Python has it.
Yeah, like you can use R too. I've used R a little bit, but Python just seems to be the most popular for sure right now. And then the other major point that we wanted to talk more about was the whole PEP, Python Enhancement Proposal system, and just how, like we were looking on the website before recording this, and I would recommend anybody out there to just go check out the PEP website, because it's really cool to see just how well documented everything is. Like you have different proposals out there for formatting in C, because Python can call out to C, and there's like proposals for how that should be done properly. What other types of proposals?
So you have the meta PEPs, which I really like. Stack Overflow has something similar with their meta site, but it's just, this is for talking about how to do PEPs and follow the PEP process better or improve it. But you still do that through PEPs.
Oh,
and it's kind of like what was it? RFCs?
Yeah,
RFPs.
I know what you're talking about.
It's like the HTTP protocol is RFP. God, now I can't remember. I think it's an RFP. Each one with a number. But that same concept has gone over as PEPs, which somebody gets to propose it.
Yeah.
And they have the guidelines of when you're writing a PEP, this is what you do. Then the community and the core developers get to look over it. And it used to be that our benevolent dictator for life made the final choice of whether it went into Python or not. But now it's the Python steering committee that will then vote on it and decide if it goes into Python or not.
Right. And it's also, to be noted, it seems like it's a very selective process. Like the people who are voting on this, these
are the Python core developers that are doing it.
It's very strongly considered what the addition is going to do for the language. So the whole process and the way that it works really keeps Python very selective in achieving those, I think probably just those initial goals that it was set out to achieve, and not like duplicating ways of doing things, just keeping everything very clear and organized. I know we didn't talk about this before, but I think one of the PEPs that they've been talking about a lot recently, and a lot of people have been submitting proposals for, is the global interpreter lock in Python. Like that's a big one that people are trying to solve and figure out, like if we wanted to remove the lock, which just prevents Python code from running on multiple threads at the same time. Like the thought that goes into something like that is so extraordinary between the people who are submitting proposals and the council members. What is it? The
steering committee.
The steering committee. Yeah, it's just a really awesome process for keeping the language as clean as it is right now.
Yeah, and the best part is, just because you write a PEP doesn't mean it gets approved.
Right.
And I think that's taking this over to pull requests as an analogy. I see all the time, like just because a pull request was written almost necessitates it's getting merged and approved. And there are times where no is a very powerful word and it needs to be used. Yeah. And I think it's awesome that PEPs will be told no. Yeah. It's not just no, it's like no and here's why. And I love that. I love the use of the word no.
Yeah, like in some pull requests, it's like you can write so many comments to try and change it to what is the proper way to do it, or you can just say no, let's just do it the right way instead of trying to fix all this and make it into the thing that it should be. Like with PEP, it's like you really have to do things the way that the board agrees.
Yeah, I was more so saying that there are enhancements that I've seen come in for projects in a PR, where one developer really liked it, found it very useful, but then it made life harder for other developers, and it's one of those things where it's like, well, no, we shouldn't put that in, or it hides some of the details that we need to make sure is in the forefront of our minds when we go to make changes. But because the PRs were written, they got merged, and it's just like, that shouldn't happen. And just because somebody writes the PEP doesn't mean that they should be allowed to change Python, for whatever their one use case is. I really like that there's a committee now that...
Yeah.
And I think Van Rossum did a wonderful job while he was the benevolent dictator for life, of keeping Python, playing nice with everybody. But I think we need to give him a new title.
Yeah, I mean,
because he's not really the dictator anymore. He stepped down, so it's the benevolent dictator for a while.
Yeah, for a long time.
I'm just kidding. Tangential to the point.
Yeah, I mean, he's still the creator of Python. He can have that forever. Okay, so I guess just some other, because that's a huge point, we think, for why Python, it's not a fad. It's something that is really liked by the community.
Yeah.
It's maintained by the community. Like, people are very disciplined about it, but it's also just so well liked. So we could talk about that just for a moment, because people love to write Python. It's super fun and quick and easy, and you can really get your point across. And at least for me, I've always really liked writing Python. Like, there's all the community backing and the open source portion of it. It really is a great language to be working with. I've never had problems or anything I really disliked about it. What about you? Is it just completely likable?
The Pythonic way would be the only thing that kind of gets at me at times.
Yeah.
And I do
talked.
like the Pythonic way, but there are times where people use the Pythonic way as a cop-out. Mm-hmm. Oh, this isn't very Pythonic, or the Pythonic way is this. It's like, well, just because that's the Pythonic way doesn't mean there's not a good reason to be doing it some other way. And there's almost like a defense built into that. Like, well, I did it the Pythonic way. It's above reproach because it's community sourced or something. And it's not really with the Pythonic way. It's how people use the Pythonic way. But other than that, there's not too much I dislike. Mm-hmm. I can nitpick about things not being private. I believe private variables are important. And I think
one thing I'll just quickly mention for people who haven't used Python, because one of the PEP formatting proposal, PEP 8, talks about you put a little underscore in front of something that's protected, 2 underscores in front of something that's private. And it's not like this changes the way that the language works. Like, all your functions are still public, but you can still hint. There's proposals out there for hinting to other developers if something is private or protected. So, I mean, I think that's great, because it helps you be more disciplined about your code. But like what Derek is saying, there's nothing to say that you can't call a method that has an underscore. And
yeah, that frustration comes to developers. There are undisciplined developers, and undisciplined developers really bother me. But they all seem to find really good ways to defend their choices. And it's like,
it's Pythonic.
It's so frustrating. Like, you don't really get it.
Yeah.
But other than that, no, Python's been great.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
I mean, we already mentioned like Python is inspiring other languages like Go. That just kind of goes to show that it's not just like a one and done sort of thing. Like when Python happened, it really made an impact. Another point that you mentioned is Python 2 is included in every major Unix distribution now.
Yep. It's been like that for a while. So whatever, Linux comes out, Red Hat, CentOS, Ubuntu, Python 2's on it. I assume now that Python 2's end of life, it's not end of life yet. It's got like 3 days.
Oh, does it?
But I assume that new distros coming out. Python 3?
Yeah. But
I don't know. I'm not one of those devs, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll find out. And also, just how well Python is supported by other communities, like within AWS and Google Cloud. And I mean, a lot of different databases, MongoDB, anything that includes an SDK for it usually will have a Python version of the SDK. Like people want to support Python because people are using it so much. Yep.
Most technologies and platforms give you some way to interact with it using Python.
Exactly. Okay, yeah. And then still a couple more. So a lot of people say that Python is slow, and like, sure, it is a slower executing language than C or Java. Many other languages are quicker.
Yeah, compiled languages are always quicker than interpreted languages.
Yeah. So there's that. But Python, for one, you can call out to C with Python, and that's something that is included. So if you need the speed, it's there. And many packages that you're going to import take advantage of this. So if you have packages that are doing some heavy processing for you, a lot of the time they will be running C code. So there are ways to speed up your Python by doing that. Also ways to speed up your Python code by horizontally scaling or doing things asynchronously. So it's not like a showstopper if your Python code starts slowing down a bit. And then the other main point about that is the execution time is not always the most important thing. So while the execution time could be slightly slower than some other languages, the amount of time it takes to push out new features or make a new product or new application is very fast. So in an article that I saw online, the argument was that business speed is a lot of the time more important than the execution speed anyway. So there's some pros and cons.
That's what businesses care about.
Exactly.
Get a product out as soon as possible so you can start making some money off of it and you can fund it.
Yeah.
That's the engineering business trade-off we make all the time as software engineers. But yeah, in this case here, is the seconds of slowness from Python worth the hours of paying a developer to do it in something else?
Exactly.
So if it takes me 6 hours to do it in C# and 30 minutes to do it in Python, how many seconds can we really let go before they've paid for my 6 hours as a developer? And that's a lot of seconds.
And it's not even usually seconds of slowness. It's like 0.1 or 0.05. Like something really minute, unless you're doing like making a whole bunch of API calls, which you could just do asynchronously. It's like, for the most part, you're not slowing down your code a whole bunch by doing it in Python. There's more benefits, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, that's the big one where people kind of hate on Python is, oh, it's slow. Well, it's not that slow. Computers are fast nowadays.
Yeah.
If we go back to the 80s and we talk, Python's slow, but not today.
Okay, well, that hits all the points.
Sweet, we did it.
Cool. So yeah, thanks for listening, and definitely send us some emails or hit us up on social media. Let us know what you think about Python. Do you think it's a fad? Hopefully you don't after listening to this. But let us know what you like about Python and what you don't like about Python. We want to hear from you. Very curious. So yeah, we've got our email address, namespace.pod @gmail.com. We also have Instagram and
Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, Instagram and Twitter.
Namespace_pod.
Yep. And you can find us on Facebook also if you just search Namespace Podcast.
Look at that, man. We're everywhere.
Yeah.
It's hard to get away from us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sneak peek, what? Next, we're going to cover languages to learn in 2020, right?
Yeah, I think
we're going to be stereotypical. New year, new languages. Mm-hmm. Let's go.
Yes. All right, cool.
All right, thanks for hanging out.
Yep, thanks for listening.